Raymond Eugene Tatum had been working on cars since he was 9 years old. His father, Joseph, had taught him in the driveway of their house on Millbrook Avenue. Not as a lesson, as a fact of life. Joseph Tatum worked the assembly line at the Riverside Ford plant for 28 years. He knew every component of an engine by touch. He could identify a sound in a running car the way a musician identifies a note immediately, precisely, without having to think about it. He brought that knowledge home. He kept it in his hands. And on Saturday mornings, starting when Raymond was 9, he put those hands beside Raymond's hands on whatever was sitting under the hood of whatever neighbor's car had been parked in front of the house that week. He said, "Watch first, then try. If you break it, we fix it together. There is nothing here you can break that we cannot fix together." Raymond watched, then he tried. He broke things. They fixed them together. By age 12, Raymond could change oil and filters without assistance. By 14, he had done his first brake job on Mrs. Harris's Buick Skylark, which pulled left on every stop. He took the front wheels off. He inspected the calipers and the rotors. He replaced the left front pad, which had worn to the metal. He put the wheels back. He bled the lines. He had Mrs. Harris drive it around the block while he stood in the driveway listening. She came back and said, "It's perfect." He said, "Yes, ma'am." She paid him $12. He gave 8 of them to his father. Joseph said, "Keep it." Raymond said, "I learned it from you." Joseph said, "I know. Keep it." His mother, Evelyn, did alterations and seamstress work from the front room. She worked on whatever people brought her. Wedding dresses, school band uniforms, a man's 30-year-old suit that needed the elbows replaced. She charged what the work cost. Not what the market would bear. What the work cost. She kept a ledger of every garment, what came in, what was done, what it cost when it went out. She had been keeping the ledger since 1971. When Raymond opened his shop in 2005, she gave him a blank ledger and said, "Keep the record. The record is the shop. If something is in the record, it is real. If it is not in the record, you cannot prove it happened." She had been keeping records for 34 years at that point. She understood what the record was for. Raymond graduated from Riverside Community College in 1994 with a degree in automotive technology. He had spent 3 years there. He had also spent those 3 years working Friday nights and Saturdays at Barfield's service station on Commerce Street, where the owner, a man named Denny Barfield, had taken him on at 17 and paid him fairly and taught him the business side of a shop. Parts ordering, labor estimates, customer communication. The specific skill of explaining a complex mechanical problem to someone who knows nothing about mechanics and making them feel respected rather than ignorant. This last skill turned out to be as important as anything he had learned in the classroom. Maybe more so. He worked for 8 years at Hammond Auto, the dealership service center at the north end of Riverside. He was the fastest certified technician they had. In year 2, the service supervisor, a man named Ted Greer, who had been in automotive service for 30 years, told Raymond, "You have a diagnostic instinct I haven't seen since I was at GM in the 80s. He said you hear the car differently. Raymond had said, "My father taught me to listen before I touch." Ted had nodded. He said, "That's exactly it." He was promoted to lead tech in year 3. In year 4, he trained 2 new technicians. He did not think of himself as a trainer. He thought of himself as someone who showed people what he knew. The distinction mattered to him. A trainer follows a curriculum. Someone who shows what they know follows the car. He showed them how to listen. He showed them how to let the diagnostic come to you rather than rushing toward a conclusion. One of the 2 technicians he trained, a young man named Victor Reyes, became the lead tech at a dealership in the city 3 years later. Victor sent Raymond a text on the day he was promoted. It said, "I still listen before I touch." Raymond had kept that text. He did not keep many texts. In year 6, he was offered the service manager position. He turned it down. He said, "I want to work on cars." The service manager does not work on cars. They offered again in year 7. He turned it down again. In year 8, he gave notice. He was going to open his own shop. He had saved $11,000 over 8 years. He had lived carefully. He had driven the same car, a 1994 F-150, that he maintained himself, which cost him almost nothing to keep running for 6 of those years. He had eaten lunch from home every day. He had not taken a vacation, not because he was unhappy, because he was building towards something that required a specific number in the account. He knew the number. He tracked it monthly. When it reached 11,000, he called his mother's sister Agnes. Agnes was 71 years old and had no children. She had watched Raymond work since he was 9. She had been at the opening of every significant chapter of his life: his graduation from community college, his first day at Hammond, his wedding to Gloria in 1999. She had told him 2 years before the shop, "When you are ready, you come to me." He had come to her on a Sunday afternoon. She had written the check without asking for terms. He had written her a repayment schedule anyway, a full amortization, a reasonable interest rate, a monthly payment he knew he could sustain. She had looked at it and said, "You wrote me a mortgage." He said, "You gave me a loan." She said, "I gave you a gift." He said, "I know. I'm giving you a schedule." She had accepted both. He paid it off in 4 years. Tatum's Auto opened on Calloway Avenue on March 3, 2005. 1 bay to start. A used lift he had bought from a shop that was closing in Millbrook County. He and his father had driven the truck to pick it up on a January Saturday. Joseph had helped him load it. Joseph had said nothing about the drive or the lift. He had looked at the lift carefully when they got back to Calloway. He had said, "It's a good one." He had said, "Check the seals every 6 months." Raymond had said, "I will." He had checked the seals every 6 months for 19 years. The lift was still running. He had a tool chest that had taken 3 years to fully stock. He had bought tools the way he had saved money, methodically, one category at a time, the right tool rather than the cheap tool. Joseph had told him once a mechanic is only as good as his tools. He had also told him the tool is only as good as the hand that holds it. Both things were true simultaneously. He had a desk in the back room with a phone and a parts catalog and Evelyn's blank ledger. He opened the ledger on day 1 and wrote, Entry 1. March 3, 2005. Vehicle, 1998 Honda Accord owner, R. Simmons oil change and filter. Service complete, 9:47 a.m. Test drive 9:52 a.m. to 9:58 a.m. Vehicle returned to owner 10:03 a.m. He had been keeping the ledger the same way since that day. Every vehicle, every service, every test drive. The time and the time out, the mileage before and after the work performed, the date returned to owner. He was on his 19th ledger. His mother had come to the shop in the first week. She had asked to see the ledger. He had handed it over. She had read the first 4 entries. She had said, "The handwriting is better than mine." He said, "You wrote the same thing for 30 years. She said, "Yes." She said, "And then I could do it without looking." He said, "The car entries are all different." She said, "The format is the same." She said, "The format is what holds the information." He said, "Yes." She looked at him. She said, "You understand what I gave you?" He said, "I do." She said, "Good." She handed the ledger back. 19 ledgers later. The current entry begun the previous morning when Gerald Whitmore had dropped off his 2024 Mercedes S580 was entry number 3847. He did not think about the number in those terms. He thought about the car. He thought about the brake pads. He thought about whether the left rear caliper had the slight binding he had noticed on the initial inspection, and whether the fluid flush had addressed it, or whether he needed to go back in. He thought about whether the test drive would tell him what he needed to know. He had been thinking about cars this specifically for 43 years. He intended to keep doing it. The shop on Calloway Avenue had grown. By 2008, it had a second bay. He had needed the second bay for 2 years before he could afford it. He had managed on one bay by scheduling precisely and moving quickly. Lorraine had helped. She had come to Tatum's in 2006 answering a help wanted ad he had placed in the Tribune. She had no experience in automotive service. She had experience in 3 other service businesses and had kept the books for all 3. He had hired her on a trial basis. She had been there ever since. She ran the front desk, managed the schedule, ordered parts from 3 suppliers, and played them against each other for price, managed the accounts receivable, and had on 2 separate occasions identified errors in Raymond's supplier contracts that had saved the shop significant money. She treated the shop as if she owned it. Raymond had told her once, "You run this place." She had said, "You run the bays. I run everything else." He said, "That's what I mean." She said, "I know." By 2012, there was a 3rd bay and an alignment rack. The alignment rack had been a specific goal since 2009. He had saved for it separately. He had written the target number in the top corner of the front page of the 6th ledger when he started it. When the rack was paid for, he had drawn a line through the number. The line was still there in the 6th ledger on the shelf. Marcus Webb had come in at 22, fresh from automotive school. He had come with a diploma and a willingness to learn and no actual sense yet of what he did not know. Raymond had recognized the combination. He had hired him. The first 6 months, Marcus had made mistakes. Raymond had corrected each mistake once clearly and moved on. He did not repeat the correction. He expected Marcus to remember. Marcus remembered. By year 2, Marcus was diagnosing independently on routine work. By year 3, Raymond trusted him with complex electrical faults. By year 5, Marcus was the kind of technician who could run a shift without direction. He still worked at Tatum's. He had been offered positions at 2 dealerships and had turned both down. He said, "I learn more here." Raymond said, "You could run your own shop." Marcus said, "I know." He paused. He said, "I'm watching how you do it first." Raymond had nodded. Deshaun was 23, finishing a degree in mechanical engineering at the State University. He worked Saturdays and some weekdays. He had his father's hands and his grandmother Evelyn's organizational instinct. He had also his mother Gloria's habit of asking why. He did not accept the first explanation of anything. He asked why until he understood the underlying reason. This was occasionally exhausting. It was always useful. He kept his own set of notes. In addition to what Raymond showed him in the bay, Deshaun kept notes on every diagnostic he observed, cross-referencing the symptoms with the eventual solution. He was building his own diagnostic library. Raymond had seen the notebook. He had not said anything. He had put the notebook back where he found it. He had thought, there will be a 38th ledger someday. It will have different handwriting. Gerald Whitmore had been bringing his vehicles to Tatum's Auto since 2013. 11 years. He had 4 vehicles, a Range Rover, a BMW 540, a 2019 Porsche Cayenne that he rarely drove, and the 2024 Mercedes S580 that was currently on Raymond's lift. Raymond had serviced 3 of the 4. Gerald had found Tatum's through a colleague at his former law firm who had said simply, "He is the best mechanic in the city." Gerald had called the shop. Lorraine had answered. Gerald had described the problem with the BMW, a vibration in the steering column at highway speeds. She had scheduled him for the following Thursday. Raymond had identified the problem in 40 minutes, a worn front upper control arm bushing. He had fixed it and test-driven the car for 12 miles. He had returned it to Gerald at 4:15. Gerald had paid the estimate without discussion. On the way out, he had shaken Raymond's hand and said, "I'll bring the Range Rover next." He had brought the Range Rover the following month. He had been back every quarter since. Gerald was 62 years old. He was a retired attorney who now managed a small portfolio of commercial real estate investments. He was precise about appointments and prompt with payment and specific in his communication about what he wanted from a service visit. Raymond liked these qualities. Gerald was also the kind of client who did not tell a mechanic how to do his job. This was the quality Raymond valued most. He had worked with clients who stood over his shoulder and offered suggestions. He had worked with clients who disagreed with diagnoses they had not performed and could not perform. He had learned patience with them. He preferred Gerald. The 2024 S580 had come in that morning at 9:15. brake pads all 4 corners, front rotors which had developed uneven wear, a brake fluid flush. Raymond had done the initial inspection himself. He had put Marcus on the front end and taken the rear himself. By 1:30, all 4 corners were done. By 2:30, the fluid was flushed and bled. By 2:47, the car was back on the ground and Raymond was satisfied with the work. He wrote it in the ledger. Entry 3847-2024, Mercedes S580 Matic Navy Blue VIN ending 2941. Owner G. Whitmore. In 9:15 a.m. Work brake pads all 4 front rotors, fluid flush. Completed 2:47 p.m. Test drive initiated. He left the shop at 3:04. He told Deshawn I'll be back by 3:30. Deshawn said Gerald's car. Raymond said yes. Deshawn said, how's the rear caliper? Raymond said, that's what I'm going to find out. He drove the S580 out of the Calloway lot and turned north toward Westfield Boulevard. He had been doing this test drive route for 19 years. Calloway to Westfield, which was a long, straight commercial boulevard that allowed him to get the car to 45 miles per hour for a sustained brake test hold speed. Apply brakes, note the response repeat. Then right on Commerce, which had a curve and a gradient that stressed the system differently. Then back down to Calloway. About 8 miles total. He had done this route with cars ranging from a 1991 Civic to a Bentley that a client had brought in 2 years ago with a noise in the power steering pump. He drove every car the same way on this route. He paid attention to the same things. Left brake response compared to right. Pedal feel spongy or firm. Any pull in either direction. Any vibration through the steering wheel under braking. The S580 was braking cleanly. The left rear caliper that had concerned him was releasing correctly. The pedal feel was firm and even. He was satisfied. He was on the return leg of the route coming down Commerce toward Calloway when the lights came on behind him. He looked in the mirror. Patrol car. He pulled to the right and stopped. He put the car in park. He put both hands on the wheel. He breathed once. He had been pulled over twice in his life in a customer's car. Once in 1998 in a Cadillac DeVille belonging to a client at Hammond Auto. The officer that time had run the registration, confirmed the situation, and waved him on in 4 minutes. This time he did not know how long it would take. He did not know the officer. He knew to keep his hands visible and speak clearly and answer the first question before it was asked. He put down the window. The officer, young mid-20s, short-sleeved uniform, walked up to the driver's side. He said, "Sir, do you know why I pulled you over?" Raymond said, "No, sir, I don't. I'm a mechanic. I'm doing a test drive on this vehicle after brake service. I have the work order right here." He pointed to the paper on the passenger seat. The officer said, "Is this your vehicle?" Raymond said, "No, sir. It belongs to Gerald Whitmore. His contact information is on the work order. My shop is Tatum's Auto on Calloway Avenue. I can give you the shop number." The officer said, "Step out of the vehicle, please." Raymond stepped out. He stood by the door. He kept his hands visible. He was wearing his work shirt, light gray Tatum's Auto, embroidered on the left chest, his name on the right. He had been wearing some version of this shirt every working day for 19 years. This was his uniform. It said, "I am here for this." The officer said, "License and registration." Raymond said, "The registration is in the glove box. May I reach in for it?" The officer said, "I'll get it." He reached in. He found the registration. He looked at it. He looked at Raymond. He said, "The vehicle is registered to Gerald Whitmore." Raymond said, "Yes, sir. Mr. Whitmore is my client. He brought the car in this morning. I completed the brake service at 2:47. I'm test driving it before I return it to him. This is standard procedure. The work order on the passenger seat documents everything." The officer looked at the work order through the window. He looked back at Raymond. He said, "Wait here." He went back to his patrol car. He was there for 7 minutes. He came back. He said, "I've run your license." He did not say what he had found. He said, "I'm going to need you to come with me." Raymond said, "On what basis?" The officer said the vehicle was flagged in a query. Raymond said, "What query?" The officer said, "We're sorting that out." Raymond said, "May I call the vehicle's owner? His number is on the work order. He can confirm everything I've told you." The officer said, "You'll be able to make calls at the station." Raymond said, "I am a mechanic doing a test drive. I have a work order with the client's name, the vehicle's VIN, the work performed, and my shop's information. I would like to call my client before this goes any further." The officer said, "Sir, I need you to come with me." He called for a second unit. Raymond stood by the car. He put his hands in his pockets. He thought about his father, Joseph, standing at the assembly line at the Ford plant. 28 years. Every morning, the same floor, the same line, the same parts. Joseph had told Raymond once, the line does not change. What you bring to the line changes. You bring your whole self to that floor. You do not bring half. You do not bring the part that is tired or frustrated. You bring all of it and you put it into the work. That is what the work requires, and that is what it deserves. He had told Raymond this in the context of a conversation about the shop. Raymond had been having a difficult month in year 4 of Tatum's auto. A compressor had failed. A parts supplier had sent the wrong rotors 3 times. He had been behind on 2 jobs. He had said to Joseph, "I don't know if I can keep doing this at this level." Joseph had said, "You can." He had said, "Bring your whole self." He had said, "The work deserves it." Raymond thought about that in the street on Westfield Boulevard. He thought, "I have brought my whole self to this car. I have worked on this car since 9:15 this morning. I know this car. I know this client. The work is in the ledger. My uniform says my name." He thought about Denny Barfield at the service station. He had been 17 when Denny hired him. Denny was 60 at the time, white-haired, slow-moving, quiet. He had a way of standing in the service bay and watching a car that Raymond had learned to recognize as the same thing Raymond himself did. Listening before touching, seeing before deciding. Raymond had asked him once, "How did you know to hire me?" Denny had said, "I watched you look at my cars." He said, "You looked at them the way I look at them. That is not a common thing." Denny had retired in 1997. He had given Raymond a wrench set that had belonged to his own father. He said, "I have no children. You know how to use these." Raymond still had the wrenches. They were in the chest at the shop. He used them on specific jobs, not all jobs. The ones that required a certain kind of attention. He thought, "I am standing on Westfield Boulevard in a shop shirt with my name on it. I have the work order on the seat. I have the ledger entry. I have a client who has known me for 11 years. I have 19 years of entries in a ledger that started with a blank book from my mother. I have everything. I am going to be exactly who I am, and I am going to wait for this to resolve because it is going to resolve because it always resolves." He also thought about the caliper. He still needed to finish the test drive. He noted internally that the pedal feel had been clean before the stop. He wanted to get back on the road. He had 2 more cars at the shop. Deshawn was managing, but Deshawn was still learning the Camry diagnosis, and Raymond wanted to be there when he pulled the codes. He thought about the caliper. He thought about the work. He stayed calm because the work was calm. The work did not panic. He would not panic either. The second unit arrived at 3:22. Officer Linda Parks. She reviewed the situation. She looked at the work order through the window. She looked at Raymond. She looked at the first officer. Officer Kyle Morrison, she called him Kyle. They knew each other, and she said, "Have you called the owner?" Morrison said, "The subject says the owner's number is on the work order." Parks said, "Have you called it?" Morrison said, "I was going to run it through dispatch first." She said, "Call the number on the work order." Morrison went back to his car. He called the number. Raymond could not hear the conversation. He stood by the patrol car. He counted the seconds the way he counted seconds on a brake test, deliberately, without rushing. Morrison came back. He said the owner confirmed there's a vehicle in service at Tatum's Auto. He said he's asking us to confirm you're the mechanic. Raymond said, "I am. My name is Raymond Tatum. I am the owner of Tatum's Auto at 847 Calloway Avenue. This is my shop shirt. I have been servicing Mr. Whitmore's vehicles for 11 years. Morrison said he also said he's coming down. Raymond said that's fine. He said, am I being detained? Morrison said we're verifying the situation. Raymond said, I understand. Am I being detained? Morrison said we'd like you to remain here while we verify. Raymond said you have my license. You have called the vehicle's owner. He has confirmed the vehicle is in service. I am standing here in my shop shirt with my name on it. If you are detaining me, I would like that stated clearly. Morrison said it's precautionary. Raymond said precautionary detention requires a stated basis. Morrison said he needed to step away and make another call. Raymond stood. He looked at the S580. He thought about the rear caliper. It had been releasing cleanly on the test drive. He had not heard any drag. He was going to write in the ledger that the caliper was performing within spec. He was going to write test drive complete all systems nominal vehicle ready for client return. He was going to write that. He needed to get back to the shop to write it. There were 2 more vehicles waiting in the bay. Gerald Whitmore arrived at 3:37, 14 minutes after Morrison had called him. He had been at his attorney's office in the middle of a property closing. He had signed the documents he needed to sign and told the attorney he had to leave. He had not explained why. He had gotten in his Range Rover and driven to Westfield Boulevard. He parked behind the second patrol car. He got out. He walked to Morrison. He said, my name is Gerald Whitmore. I am the owner of the vehicle. I spoke with you on the phone 12 minutes ago. He said this man is Raymond Tatum. He is the owner of Tatum's Auto at 847 Calloway Avenue. He has serviced my vehicles for 11 years. I brought the Mercedes to his shop at 9:15 this morning for brake service. He has every right to be test driving this vehicle. I need you to release him. Morrison said we still need to verify. Gerald said, what do you need to verify? I am the owner of the vehicle. I am telling you this man is my mechanic. I am standing here in front of you telling you, what else do you need? He said his shop shirt has his name on it. He said the work order on the seat of my car has my name and his shop's name, and the VIN of this vehicle. He said if you called the plate when you stopped this car, my name came up. My name matches the name on the registration. The name on the registration matches the name on the work order. The name on the work order matches this man's shop. He pointed to the embroidery on Raymond's chest. He said, I would like to know the basis on which you stopped this car. Morrison said the vehicle matched a description in an alert. Gerald said, what alert? What is the alert number? Morrison did not have an alert number. Sergeant Diana Walsh arrived at 3:43. She had heard the radio traffic. She pulled up and got out and walked to the scene. She looked at the car. She looked at Raymond. She looked at Morrison. She looked at Gerald Whitmore. She looked at the work order, which she took from the passenger seat and read. She read the entire work order. She looked at the Tatum's Auto embroidery on Raymond's shirt. She looked at the ledger entry Raymond had on the passenger seat. He had brought the current page of the ledger, as he always did on test drives in case of exactly this situation. She read the entry. Entry 3847, vehicle description. Owner name, VIN, work performed, time completed, test drive initiated. She walked back to Morrison. She said, what alert? He said, She said, what is the alert number? He could not produce it. She said, did you run this plate when you made the stop? He said, yes. She said, what came back? He said, Gerald Whitmore. She said, matching. He said, yes. She said, and you initiated a stop because. He said the vehicle matched a description. She said, from what source? He could not produce a source. She walked to Raymond. She said, Mr. Tatum. He said, yes. She said, I have reviewed the work order and your ledger documentation. I want to verify one thing. She called the shop. Lorraine answered. Walsh confirmed Raymond Tatum left the shop at approximately 3:04 p.m. in a 2024 navy blue Mercedes S580 to complete a post-service test drive. Lorraine said that is correct. He always takes the customer's paperwork with him. He has done it that way since we opened." Walsh said thank you. She hung up. She said to Raymond, "Mr. Tatum, I apologize for this stop. You are free to go." She said, "I will need a statement from you at the department. Will you be able to come in this week?" He said Thursday morning. She said Thursday morning is fine. She said again, "I am sorry for this." She said to Gerald Whitmore, "Mr. Whitmore, thank you for coming." He said, "I interrupted a closing to be here." She said, "I understand." He said, "I want to file a formal statement." She said, "Yes, I will send you the form today." Gerald looked at Raymond. He said, "Are you all right?" Raymond said, "I am fine." Gerald said, "I am sorry this happened." Raymond said, "It is not your fault." Gerald said, "No, but I am sorry." Raymond said, "I want to finish the test drive." Gerald looked at him. Raymond said, "The route isn't complete. I need to finish it. I'm not riding this car back into service until I finish the test drive." Gerald said, "Of course." Raymond got back in the S580. He pulled onto Westfield Boulevard. He completed the remaining 3 miles of the route. He applied the brakes at 4 test points. He noted the pedal feel. He noted the response time. He noted the sound or the absence of sound, which was what he was listening for. There was no sound. The brakes were clean. The caliper was releasing. The car was ready. He drove back to Calloway Avenue. He drove the last quarter-mile slowly. He paid attention to the car. The brakes were clean on the final 2 stops. The pedal feel was firm and progressive. No pull, no noise. The car was ready. He pulled into the lot at 4:22. Lorraine looked up from the desk when he came in. She said, "I heard from Marcus." He said it was a stop. She said, "I heard." She said, "Are you—" He said, "Yes." She looked at him for one more second. Then she said, "Gerald's car ready?" It was not a question. He said, "Yes." She said, "I'll call him." He said, "Everything nominal." He went into the back room. He sat at his desk. He turned on the desk lamp. He sat there for a moment with his hands on the desk. He was not composing himself. He was already composed. He was transitioning. The way his father transitioned at the kitchen table every afternoon after the postal route. He was crossing from one thing to the next. He needed a moment for that crossing. He took the moment. Then he opened the ledger. He found entry 3847. He wrote test drive completed. All systems nominal. Left rear caliper releasing cleanly within spec. Vehicle ready for client return. 4:22 p.m. He wrote below that note test drive interrupted by traffic stop, Westfield Boulevard, approximately 3:11 p.m. to 4:09 p.m. Documentation reviewed by Sergeant D. Walsh. All documentation confirmed. Stop cleared. Test drive resumed and completed per standard procedure. He wrote this because it had happened. Because if it happened, it belonged in the record. Because the record that only contained the things that went smoothly was not a complete record. He wrote down what happened. That was the job. He looked at the entry. He had written 3,847 of these. Not every entry had been simple. Some had required 3 test drives. Some had required him to go back to the lift twice. One had required him to call in a specialist for an electrical issue he could not resolve. He had written that in the entry too. He had written, called specialist. This was not a failure. This was the accurate record of what occurred. Every car that went out had a complete record, not a flattering record. A complete one. This was what the work required. This was what his mother had taught him with the seamstress ledger. This was what his father had modeled with 43 years of meticulous work. He closed the ledger. He went to the bay. Deshawn was looking at a 2019 Camry on the second lift. He looked up when Raymond came in. He said, "How's the S580? Raymond said, "Clean. Rear caliper is fine." He said, "Everything check out?" Raymond said, "Yes." Deshawn said, "What happened out there?" Raymond said, "Officer made a stop." Deshawn said what for. Raymond said he had a description. Deshawn said of what. Raymond said he couldn't say. Deshawn was quiet for a moment. He said, "Are you all right?" Raymond said yes. He said, "I want you to see the ledger when you have a minute. Entry 3847. Every detail is in there. Exactly what happened, times and all." Deshawn said, "Okay." Raymond said, "That is how we do it." Deshawn said, "I know." Raymond said, "I know you know. I am saying it again. The record is the shop." Deshawn said, "Grandma used to say that." Raymond said, "I know where I got it." Joseph Tatum had retired from the Ford plant in 2001 with a pension and a watch and a framed letter from the plant manager that said he had been a model employee for 28 years. Joseph had looked at the letter. He had folded it carefully and put it in the envelope it came in. He had put the envelope in the dresser drawer. He had then gone out to the garage, where he had a '67 Chevy Impala he had been restoring on evenings and weekends for 4 years, and he had worked on it for 3 hours. He had told Raymond about this later. He had said, "The letter is what they thought of me. The car is what I know about myself. I needed to be with what I know." Raymond had thought about that for years. He had thought about it on the day he signed the lease on Calloway Avenue. He had thought about it when the second bay went in. He had thought about it on the Westfield Boulevard curb in his uniform with his hands visible waiting for the situation to resolve. Joseph had also kept a notebook. He had kept it from his first day at the plant until his last. In the notebook was a log of every vehicle section he had worked on and every specific task he had performed, and every anomaly he had noticed, a misaligned component, a tolerance outside spec, anything that had required a second look or a conversation with the floor supervisor. 28 years of that. The notebook was thick. It had a rubber band around it from its last day at the plant. Joseph had put the rubber band on it on the drive home sitting in the passenger seat of Raymond's car and had never taken it off. Raymond had asked him once, "Why do you keep the notebook?" Joseph had said so that if someone ever says I wasn't there, I can show them I was. He had said so that if someone ever says I didn't do the work, I can show them the work. He said nobody can take what is written down. They can say they didn't see it. They cannot say it didn't happen. The notebook was in Raymond's back room, on the shelf above the ledgers. He had put it there the week after Joseph's retirement. Joseph had given it to him at the dinner they had that Friday, the whole family, Gloria and the kids, Evelyn, Agnes. Joseph had said, "You keep it." He said, "You understand what it is." Raymond had not read it in years. He knew what was in it. The same thing that was in his ledgers. The work recorded. The presence documented. The evidence that a person was here doing this on this day at this time with full attention and full competence. Nobody could take that. Not a patrol car on Westfield Boulevard. Not an alert that could not be produced. Not an officer who could not answer his own question. The work was in the ledger. The ledger was in the room. The room was his. 3,847 entries, plus Joseph's 28 years above them. That was the record. That was everything. That. He changed his gloves. He picked up his diagnostic tablet. He went to the Camry. He said to Deshawn, "What are we looking at?" Deshawn said, "Misfire on cylinder 3, maybe 4. Could be plugs, could be coil pack." Raymond said, "Let's find out." He plugged in. He read the codes. He thought about what the codes meant and what they required and what he was going to do about them. He was thinking only about that. He was fully there. His whole self in the bay attending to the work. Gerald Whitmore submitted his formal statement to the department on Thursday afternoon. It was 4 paragraphs. The first described his relationship with Tatum's auto and with Raymond specifically. The second described the mechanics of vehicle service and the standard industry practice of test driving after brake work. The third described what he had seen when he arrived at the scene on Westfield Boulevard. The fourth said, "Raymond Tatum has been entrusted with my vehicles for 11 years. He has never given me any reason to question that trust. What happened on the afternoon of April the 19th has given me reason to question something else entirely. I am requesting that the department review this stop with the seriousness it deserves." He signed it and dated it and sent it certified to the Chief of Police and the Civilian Review Board. Raymond came in on Thursday morning as agreed. He gave his statement to Sergeant Walsh. He was precise. He gave the exact times from the ledger. He gave the route. He gave the description of every exchange with Morrison. Walsh transcribed it. He reviewed the transcript. He signed it. He left. He was back at the shop by 10:30. There were 4 cars on the schedule. Raymond came in on Thursday morning and gave his statement. He was precise. He gave times from the ledger. He gave the exact route. He described every exchange with Morrison in sequential order without editorializing. He gave Officer Parks's name and her exact words. He gave Sergeant Walsh's name and her exact words. He gave Gerald Whitmore's arrival time and his exact words. Walsh transcribed everything. Raymond read the transcript when she was done. He made 2 corrections a time that had been written as 337 that should have been 336, and a route description that had slightly misstated which direction he turned onto Commerce Street. Walsh corrected both. Raymond signed the statement. He dated it. He thanked Walsh. He left. He was back at the shop by 10:30. He had 4 cars on the schedule. He started on the first. The formal review of Officer Morrison's conduct began 9 days after the incident. The review board examined 4 items. The first was Morrison's stop report in which he had cited a vehicle alert that the review board could not find in any dispatch log from that afternoon. The second was Sergeant Walsh's report, which documented the scene as she had found it and noted the absence of a verifiable alert. The review board also noted that Walsh had described Morrison as having called the registered owner only after the second officer prompted him to do so, not as an initial step. The third was the security footage from the Commerce Street camera, which showed the S580 driving. Normally no traffic violations, no erratic behavior, no unusual speed for the 11 blocks before Morrison initiated the stop. The footage showed the car driving within the speed limit. It showed a complete stop at the signal at Commerce and Westfield before the turn. It showed nothing that would constitute a basis for a stop. The fourth was the work order, the ledger entry, and Raymond's signed statement. The review board also noted the existence of the ledger itself. They had requested a copy of the relevant page. Raymond had provided a scan. The board reviewed entry 3847 in its entirety. They noted the time the car was received. They noted the time the work was completed. They noted the time the test drive was initiated. They noted that the entry was consistent with every other entry in the current ledger. Same format, same level of detail, no anomalies. They noted that Raymond had brought the current ledger page with him on the test drive, as documented by Walsh, who had reviewed it at the scene. The board asked Morrison one primary question: what was the basis for the stop? Morrison said the vehicle matched a description. The board asked what description. He said a call from a resident. The board asked what was the call number. He did not have a call number. The board reviewed the dispatch log for the 90 minutes before the stop. There was no call from a resident about a vehicle on Westfield Boulevard. There was no alert involving the S580H's plate or VIN. There had been no call. There had been no description. The board asked Morrison a second question after running the registration and finding the name Gerald Whitmore. Why did you not call the registered owner before initiating contact? Morrison said, I wanted to assess the situation first. The board asked, how long did you assess before approaching the vehicle? Morrison said he had observed the vehicle for approximately 3 minutes before the stop. The board asked, what did you observe during those 3 minutes? Morrison said the vehicle was on Westfield Boulevard. The board asked what else. He was quiet. Morrison had 2 prior complaints in his 7-month file. Both had been reviewed informally. Both had involved stops of black drivers in vehicles registered to white owners. Both had resulted in no action. After reviewing all 3 incidents together, the board determined a pattern existed. The board also noted that in all 3 incidents, the driver had been asked for additional documentation beyond what was required by law. The board noted this in writing. Morrison received a formal written reprimand. He was required to complete 16 hours of training in stop and identify procedures, documentation requirements and verification protocols before initiating a stop. He was placed on a 45-day supervised patrol rotation. The rotation required daily sign-off from a supervisor on each stop report. The department issued a new standing procedure when a vehicle's registration does not match the visible identity of the driver. Officers are required to contact the registered owner directly if reachable. Review any available documentation provided by the driver and document both steps before initiating any detention. The procedure was named Protocol 512. It applied department-wide. The Chief of Police issued a memo accompanying the protocol. The memo was 2 paragraphs. The second paragraph said a mechanic doing a test drive after brake service is not a suspicious person. A delivery driver in a company vehicle is not a suspicious person. A person driving a vehicle they do not own is not a suspicious person. The protocol exists so that we make this determination before we initiate contact rather than after. The memo was read at every district roll call for 2 weeks. The Riverside Business Association took up the matter at its quarterly meeting. The president of the association, a woman named Christine Park, who had run a florist's business on Commerce Street for 22 years, had read the Tribune article that ran 8 days after the incident. The article was 600 words. It mentioned Raymond's 19 years in business and the ledger system. It mentioned Joseph's notebook. The journalist, whose name was David Cho, had asked Raymond to describe the ledger system in his own words. Raymond had said every car that comes through has a record. Every test drive has a time. I don't return a car until the test drive is complete and the entry is written. That is what my mother taught me. That is what my father modeled. The record is the shop. David Cho had used that quote as the last line of the article. He had interviewed Raymond at the shop on a Wednesday morning. Raymond had been in the middle of a timing belt job on a 2017 Accord. He had continued working during the interview. David had stood to the side with his recorder and his notebook. He had not asked Raymond to stop working. He had understood that stopping would be wrong. This was the kind of journalist who understood context. Raymond had answered the questions without slowing down. He had been precise. He had said what happened when, in what order. He had said, I finished the test drive. David had said even after. Raymond had said especially after. He had said the car had to be returned to its owner. The entry had to be completed. That is how we do it. David had written all of it. He had used the quote. He had sent Raymond a copy of the article before it published. He had said, please read it for accuracy. Raymond had read it. He had made one correction, a small time discrepancy. He had sent it back. David had corrected it. The article ran accurate. Christine Park had read it at her kitchen table. She had read it twice. She had called David Cho and asked for Raymond's contact information. She had called Raymond and asked if the association could formally recognize Tatum's auto at the quarterly meeting. Raymond had said, I would rather you just send people who need brake work. She had laughed. She had said both. At the quarterly meeting, Christine Park read Gerald Whitmore's statement into the record. She had asked his permission. He had said, please. She read the 4th paragraph in full. The room was quiet when she finished. A woman in the front row, a woman named Helen Baptiste, who had owned a dry cleaning business on Millbrook Avenue for 16 years, said, I have been bringing my van to Tatum's for 6 years. She said, I want that in the record, too. Christine Park said, noted. Helen said, I want it in the actual record. Christine said it will be in the minutes. 2 other business owners spoke in similar terms. A man who ran a plumbing supply company on the South Side. A woman who owned the bakery on Commerce Street that had been open since 1988. They both said versions of the same thing. I have trusted this man with my vehicles. I am glad he kept the record the way he did. I am glad the record was there. They did not say anything more specific than that. They did not need to. Raymond sat in the back row through all of it. He was wearing his shop shirt. He had been wearing some version of this shirt every working day for 19 years. He did not stand until Christine asked him to. He stood. He said thank you. I want to say one thing. I have been in this shop for 19 years. Every car that came through has an entry. Entry 3847 was a 2024 Mercedes S580. It had brake pads, front rotors, and a fluid flush. The test drive was completed. The caliper was within spec. The car was returned to its owner. That is the entry. That is the record. That is the shop. He sat back down. The room applauded. He did not look particularly moved by the applause. He was thinking about the 4 cars on the schedule for the following morning. That night he sat at the kitchen table with Gloria. She had been a registered nurse at Riverside General for 20 years. She had her own version of what he did. She came into a room where someone needed help. She assessed precisely. She acted on the assessment. She documented everything. She had worked double shifts twice a week for years when Deshawn and Camille were small so that Raymond could keep the shop solvent through the lean years. She had not complained about the double shifts. She had said, "We are building something. Building requires time." He had not forgotten this. He thought about it whenever the schedule was hard. She knew what it meant to do the work completely. She did not dramatize her own work, and she did not expect Raymond to dramatize his. She had seen worse than a patrol stop in 20 years of emergency nursing. She did not minimize what had happened. She also did not catastrophize it. She lived in the space between those two things, which was the space where useful people lived. She expected Raymond to do his work and to be well. She asked, "Are you well?" He said, "I am." She said, "Tell me about the caliper." He told her. She listened. She did not know what a caliper was. She knew what it meant that he was talking about it. It meant he was fully back in the work. It meant the afternoon had not taken anything from him that the evening had not returned. It meant he was whole. She had been watching for this since he walked through the door at 6 o'clock. She had looked at him. She had listened to him describe the stop in the same flat, sequential way he described mechanical problems from first observation to final resolution, nothing editorialized. She had thought, he is all right. She had made the tea. He said Deshawn wants to redesign the ledger system. She said, how so? He said he wants to go digital. A tablet for each bay. Automatic timestamp. She said, what do you think? He said the information would be the same. The format doesn't matter. She said then, let him. He said yes. He's thought it through. He keeps notes. He already has the software. He showed me a demo last Thursday. She said, you didn't tell me that. He said, I was thinking about it. She said, and now. He said, and now I've decided. The record is the record, whatever holds it. She said, your mother will say the same thing. He said, yes. She said, I know. He gets the instinct from you. He said he gets the ledger from his grandmother. Gloria said, are you going to tell her what happened? He said, I'll call her on Sunday. She said she'll want the ledger entry number. He said 3847. She said she'll write it down. He said in her seamstress ledger, in the current one. She will write April 19th, entry 3847, Mercedes S580. Raymond stopped on Westfield Boulevard. All well. She has been keeping that ledger since 1971. She will write it the same way she wrote what slacks she altered in April 1971, because the record is the record. Gloria said yes. She said that is what she taught you. He said yes. He said that is why I came through it all right. He finished his tea. He said, I need to go check the schedule. There are 4 cars tomorrow. She said, Raymond. He said yes. She said, come sit for 5 more minutes. He sat. She looked at him. He looked at her. 5 minutes. That was all. He did not fill the 5 minutes. He let them be. He let the quiet be the quiet. Then he went to check the schedule. 5 minutes. Then he went to check the schedule. He went to the back room. He turned on the desk lamp. He looked at the schedule on the board. 4 cars, 8:15, 9, 10:30, noon. He checked the parts inventory against the work orders for each. Everything was in stock. Deshawn had ordered Tuesday. He always ordered Tuesday, so the parts arrived Thursday. Raymond sat at the desk. He looked at the ledger shelf. 19 ledgers. His father's notebook above them. One notebook from Joseph Tatum, 28 years on the floor. 19 ledgers from Raymond Tatum, 19 years on Calloway Avenue. 3,847 entries. 3,847 cars that had come in and gone out with their work documented and their test drives complete. He opened the current ledger. He found entry 3847. He read it. He read test drive completed. All systems nominal. Left rear caliper releasing cleanly within spec. Vehicle ready for client return. 4:22 p.m. He had written that. That was accurate. The caliper was within spec. The car had been returned. The record was complete. He closed the ledger. He sat at the desk for a few more minutes. He looked at the shelf. He looked at the 19 ledgers and Joseph's notebook above them. He thought when Deshawn takes over the bay and Deshawn would take over the bay, that was already decided even if Deshawn did not know it yet. There would be a shelf like this somewhere in the back room of whatever the shop became. The digital ledger and the paper ledger both. Because Deshawn would understand that the format was not the point. The point was the record. Raymond had taught him the point. Evelyn had taught Raymond the point. Joseph had modeled it before either of them put it into words. That was the whole thing. That was the line from the gray shirt and the assembly floor to the blank ledger and the first Honda Accord and entry number 1 at 9:47 a.m. on March 3rd, 2005. That was how a thing got passed on. Not as a lesson, as a practice. You do it. You show someone doing it. They see what it means. Then they do it. He closed the ledger. He turned off the desk lamp. He went back to the kitchen where Gloria was still at the table. He sat down. He said, "For tomorrow." She said, "Yes." He said, "We'll be all right." She said, "You are always all right." He said, "I know." He said, "I know because the ledger says so." She smiled at this. She had married a man who kept records. She had known this from the beginning. She had chosen it. He called his mother on Sunday afternoon. She was in the front room. He could hear the television in the background turned low. She said, "I heard from Gloria. He said I was going to tell you." She said, "I know." She said, "Tell me anyway." He told her. He told her about the route, the stop, the work order, the ledger page. Sergeant Walsh Gerald Whitmore interrupting the property closing. He told her about finishing the test drive after it was over. He told her about the entry. She was quiet while he talked. She said, "You wrote the stop into the entry." He said, "Yes." She said, "I would have done the same thing." He said, "I know." She said, "What is the entry number?" He said, 3847. She was quiet for a moment. He heard her moving. He knew she was getting the current ledger, her seamstress ledger. The 14th one started after he opened the shop. She had started keeping a new ledger the same year he opened. She had said, "If you are keeping a record, I am keeping a record." He had not asked what she wrote in it. He knew she kept a record of entries in his ledger that mattered to her. He heard the pen. She said 3847. He said yes. She said April the 19th. He said yes. She said your father would have said, he said, "I know what he would have said." She said, "Say it." He said, "Nobody can take what is written down." She said yes. She said, "That's right." She said, "You were there. You did the work. It is in the record." He said yes. She said, "How are the brakes on the car?" He said, "Perfect." She said, "Good. That is what matters." He thought about his father in the gray work shirt. He thought about his mother and the seamstress ledger started in 1971. He thought about Evelyn handing him the blank ledger in 2005 and saying, "Keep the record. The record is the shop." He thought about entry number 1, March 3rd, 2005, 9:47 a.m. He thought about entry number 3847. He thought about the 4 cars on Monday. He thought about the 4,000 and something the entries would be someday. He thought about Deshawn's hands on an engine, the same hands, the same source. He thought about Victor Reyes texting, "I still listen before I touch." He thought about the notebook with the rubber band sitting on the shelf above the ledgers. He thought about the letter in the dresser drawer that Joseph had not gone back to read. He thought about the car in the garage that Joseph had gone to instead. He thought about what you know about yourself. He thought about being in the Bay. He always thought about the work. He had been thinking about it since he was 9 years old in the driveway on Millbrook Avenue. He was going to think about it until the day the last car left the last bay and the ledger was closed for the final time. And then whoever had learned it from him was going to think about it instead, because the work did not stop. The work required continuity. The record required continuity. That was the job. Keep going. Keep the record. Come back tomorrow. The work was the record. The record was the shop. The shop was still open. Subscribe our channel. We find the record and we read what it says.